All right. You stay there. I'm going to sit here. We're going to do the show from here. All right, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. I might have to text people to let them know I'm here. Say hello in the chat. We've got Mary Lou here on the Mary Lou screen.
Hello.
So she's with us. And we are in chapter 7 of Jordan Peterson. Do this. Do we like long ways or do we like close up? We like close up. That's better. That's so. All right. Get my. Where's my bookmark? There's my bookmark. Okay. So we're talking about the difference between expedience and meaning. Doing something meaningful. Hey, Shaman's in the house. Says hello. Pam and Mary Lou. And Justice is in the house. Yay! He says hi, Pam. And Lawrence is here. Hey, Lawrence. Good to see you. All right. We got a few people. I might text a few more. Oh, I should. My mother wanted to watch tonight, I think. So let me text her real quick here. Hey, Mom, I'm live on YouTube. There you go. Live on YouTube. There we go. All right. So, how was everybody's week? My week was little of the good, little of the bad. I had an appointment with the allergist to see about these hives. We went over my blood work. That looks good. I got an EpiPen in case I react to this shot poorly. And it should be next week. So he's going to give me a big old shot to block histamine production in my body. And hopefully that will help. I also signed up for physical therapy because I cannot stand for more than 5 minutes without my back killing me. So I'm going to do warm pool exercises and get back in shape and get these weird kinks worked out of my back. And I think the ketamine has been helping because there are some times when I completely forget to take my medication, my long-term medication for pain, and I don't notice. So I think that's helping. And if I could get off my long-term medication, that would be fabulous because it would help reduce, and I'd be able to get more breakthrough medication. But I have a story for you. My pharmacy ran out of my long-term medication, and I had a choice of either doing 10 days at the end of the month cold turkey or using my short-acting over the weekend and waiting until they got a supply in on Monday. Well, I tried calling the pain clinic. There's no voicemail. There's no after hours, nothing. And I tried the patient portal. The patient portal wasn't working. I could not get a message from my pain doctor at all. So I'm freaking out. I do the next best thing. I call my GP. And, she says, I'll make a note of this so that your pain doctor does know that you reached out for medical help. I'm like, I don't know what to do. And she says, well, if I were you, I'd take the short acting through the weekend so you don't go through withdrawals. And then on Monday, you can get your medication, call everybody first thing Monday morning, let them know, which is exactly what I did. But then when I asked my pain doctor for more short-acting pain medication to make up for the 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and beginning of Monday, so maybe even technically 4 days, But the days that I had to make up because I didn't have my long term, I need breakthrough medication back so I can have enough for the rest of the month. She said, absolutely not. And I'm heartbroken. I really feel betrayed and I don't know how to deal with it. And I'm just hoping that I've got enough medication to get me through this month. So hopefully there won't be any ER visits. Anyway, but otherwise, yeah, doing all right, doing okay. And that little setback, really hurt my feelings, really hurt my confidence and, being taken care of, but so be it. Yeah, hopefully I'm drinking more water to help my kidneys because I got a water bottle right here. And so taking good care of myself, and that's what counts. So self-care, yay! Do what is meaningful, not what is expedient. So that's what we're doing. Where were we? Expedience. That's the hiding all the skeletons in the closet. That's covering the blood you just spilled with the carpet. That's avoiding responsibility. It's cowardly, shallow, and wrong. It's wrong because mere expedience multiplied by many repetition produces a character of a demon. He literally says the character of a demon. It is wrong because expedience merely transfers the curse on your head to someone else or to your future self in a manner that will make your future and the future generally worse instead of better. There is no faith and no courage and no sacrifice in doing what is expedience. There is no careful observation that actions and presuppositions matter or that the world is made of what matters. To have meaning in your life is better than to have what you want because you may neither know what you want nor what you truly need. Meaning is something that comes upon you of its own accord. You can set up the preconditions. You can follow meaning when it manifests itself, but you cannot simply produce it as an act of will. Ooh, I'm going to read that one more time. Something that comes upon you of its own accord. You can set up the preconditions. You can follow meaning when it manifests itself, but you cannot simply produce it as an act of will. That I know, and I lived for years. I did not have real meaning in my life, and I suffered because of it. I was like, what am I doing? I'm just here breathing. I'm taking up room and breathing somebody else's air. My life has no purpose. It has no meaning. And, to say that you can't create it as an act of will, well, that lets me off the hook. I can set the preconditions for it, but I can't make it. I can't, it's not something I can just decide upon. It's something that happens. And I think that's gorgeous because, bless my mother's heart, she tried to give me meaning by giving me things to do. Oh, you could write a book. Oh, you could do this. Oh, you could do that. But none of it was meaningful because you can't create meaning as an act of will. That's gorgeous. Meaning signifies that you are in the right place at the right time, properly balanced between order and chaos, where everything lines up as best as it can at that moment. What is expedient works only for the moment. It's immediate, impulsive, and limited. What is meaningful, by contrast, is the organization of what would otherwise merely be expedience into a symphony of being. Meaning is what is put forth more powerfully than mere words can express by Beethoven's Ode to Joy. A triumphant bringing forth from the void a pattern after pattern upon beautiful patterns, every instrument playing its part, disciplined voices layered on top of that, spanning the entire breadth of human emotion from despair to exhilaration. Meaning is what manifests itself when the many levels of being arrange themselves into a perfectly functioning harmony from atomic microcosm to cell to organ to individual to society to nature to cosmos, so that the actions at each level beautifully and perfectly facilitates action at all, such that past, present, and future are all at once redeemed and reconciled. Meaning is what emerges beautifully and profoundly, like a newly formed rosebud opening itself out of nothingness into the light of the Son of God. Meaning is the lotus striving upward through the dark lake depths, through the ever-clearing water, bluing forth on the very surface, revealing within itself the golden Buddha, himself perfectly integrated, such that the revelation of the divine will can make itself manifest in his every word and gesture. Meaning is when everything there comes together in an ecstatic dance of single purpose, the glorification of a reality, so that no matter how good it has suddenly become, it can get better and better and better and more deeply forever into the future. Meaning happens when that dance has become so intense that all the horrors of the past, all the terrible struggle engaged in by all of life and all of humanity to that moment becomes a necessary and worthwhile part of the increasingly successful attempt to build something truly mighty and good. And he puts mighty and good in capital letters. Meaning is the ultimate balance between, on the other hand, the chaos of transformation and possibility, and on the other, the discipline of pristine order, whose purpose is to produce out of the attendant chaos a new order that will be even more immaculate and capable of bringing forth a still more balanced and productive chaos and order. Meaning is the way, the path of life more abundant, the place you live when you are guided by love and speaking truth, and when nothing you want or could possibly want takes any precedent over precisely that. Do what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Now we're in on Rule 8. Woo! But I'm not perfect at this stuff. I like, there's the adrenaline rush, not in doing something expedient to get me off the hook, but like, especially in the internet world where everything flies by and everything is the right now, and you got to get your message out, as quickly as possible. And, you want to be the person who gets that comment, and, it's this struggle. And we want to be noticed, we want to be appreciated, we want to be accepted, but we're forced to do it at this lightning speed because of the way all of our instruments are, constructed. I mean, it's that way with media, to be the first person there. Even if the story's wrong, you were first. And so I won't stop and take a check on my emotions and take a check on, is this what I really want to say? Is this, am I just getting in there because I want to attack this guy and I want to out-bully the bully? Or am I adding structure and order and truth and all of that? So, I've taught myself, if I get a nasty comment or a nasty reply or something like that, I wait and I let myself calm down after that initial rush. I don't try to defend myself in that exact moment, because it's not going to come out the way that I want it to. It's just going to create further chaos and further strife. And that it can be really tempting to just, right in the moment do it. But I'm trying to calm down and not give in to all the negativity out there, you know, trying to slow down and not give in to the negativity out there. And, because expedient, oh, yeah, it's fun, but is it really going to help me or them or anyone in the long run? So, yeah, I'm working on it myself. That's what I'm saying. All right. Here is the hardest chapter for everyone. I love this chapter, but this is absolutely the hardest chapter for everyone. Justice says, I've actually thought of taking a break from the internet world. Yeah, I mean, and if you just do a 24-hour break, you don't really miss anything. People don't worry about you if it's just a 24-hour or a weekend break or something like that. You can do those, and those are really worthwhile. But even, throughout the day, I set down my phone and I'm like, I'm going to deal with real world stuff. I'm going to stop all this internet. I'm going to deal with real world stuff. And, for 4 hours, whatever, I dealt with real world stuff before I picked up my phone again to see what was happening. So, Shaman says, finding balance from ego and meaning and the meaning of ego are challenges. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm 100% with you there. So, oh man. But are you guys ready to delve into the worst chapter, the chapter that everybody hates? I love this chapter, but everybody hates this chapter. And if you know somebody who's stumbling over this chapter, just give them a lot of love. So this is Rule 8, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Truth in no man's land. I trained to become a clinical psychologist at McGill University in Montreal. While doing so, I sometimes met my classmates on the ground of Montreal's Douglas Hospital, where we had our first direct experiences with the mentally ill. The Douglas occupies acres of land and dozens of buildings. Many are connected by underground tunnels to protect workers and patients from the intermittent Montreal winters. Montreal winters. The hospital once sheltered hundreds of long-term in-house patients. This was before antipsychotic drugs and the large-scale deinstitutionalization movements of the late 60s, but all closed down the residential asylums, most often dooming the now freed patient to a much harder life on the streets. By the early 80s, when I first visited the grounds, all but the most seriously afflicted residents had been discharged. Those who remained were strange, much damaged people. They clustered around the vending machines scattered throughout the hospital's tunnels. They looked as if they had been photographed by Diane Arbus or painted by Hieronymus Bosch. Good. Shaman says, let's go. Sorry, I missed that. One day, my classmates and I were all standing in line. We were awaiting further instruction from the straight-laced German psychologist who ran the Douglas Clinical Training Program. A long-term inpatient, fragile and vulnerable, approached one of the other students, a sheltered, conservative young woman. The patient spoke to her in a friendly, childlike manner and asks, "Why are you all standing here? What are you doing? Can I come along with you?" My classmate turned to me and asked uncertainly, "What should I say to her?" She was taken aback, just as I was, by this request coming from somebody so isolated and hurt. Neither of us wanted to say anything that might be construed as rejection or a reprimand. We had temporarily entered a kind of no man's land in which society offers no ground rules or guidance. We were new clinical students, unprepared to be confronted on the grounds of a mental hospital by a schizophrenic patient asking a naive, friendly question about the possibility of social belonging. The natural conversational give and take between people attentive to contextual clues was not happening here either. What exactly were the rules in such a situation far outside the boundaries of normal social interaction? What exactly were the options? There were only two, as far as I could quickly surmise. I could tell the patient a story designed to save everyone's faces, or I could answer truthfully. We can only take 8 people in our group would have fallen into the first category, as would have, we're just leaving the hospital now. Neither of these answers would have bruised any feelings, at least on the surface, and the presence of the status difference between that divided us from her world would have gone unremarked. But neither answer would have been exactly true, so I didn't offer either. I told the patient as simply and directly as I could that we were new students training to be psychologists and that she couldn't join us for that reason. The answer highlighted the distinction between her status and ours, making the gap between us greater and more evident. The answer was harsher than a well-crafted white lie, but I already had an inkling that untruth, however well meant, can produce unintended consequences. She looked crestfallen and hurt, but only for a moment. Then she understood, and it was all right. That's just how it was. I had a strange set of experiences a few years before embarking upon my clinical training. I found myself subject to some rather violent compulsions, none acted upon, and developed the conviction in consequence that I really knew rather little about who I was and what I was up to. So, I began paying much closer attention to what I was doing and saying. The experience was disconcerting to say the least. I soon divided myself into 2 parts, one that spoke and one more detached that paid attention and judged. I soon came to realize that almost everything I said was untrue. I had motives for saying these things. I wanted to win arguments and gain status and impress people and get what I wanted. I was using language to bend and twist the world into delivering what I thought was necessary. But I was a fake. Realizing this, I started to practice only saying things that the internal voice would not object to. I started practicing telling the truth, or at least not lying. I soon learned that such a skill came in very handy when I didn't know what to do. What should you do when you don't know what to do? Tell the truth. So that's what I did my first day at Douglas Hospital. Later, I had a client who was paranoid and dangerous. Working with paranoid people is challenging. They believe they have been targeted by mysterious conspiratorial forces working malevolently behind the scenes. Paranoid people are hyper alert and hyper focused. They are tending to nonverbal cues with intentness that never manifests during ordinary human interactions. They make mistakes in interpretation, that's the paranoia, but they are still almost uncanny in their ability to detect mixed motives, judgment, and falsehood. You have to listen very carefully and tell the truth if you're going to get a paranoid person to open up to you. I listened carefully and spoke truthfully to my client. Now and then he would describe blood-curdling fantasies of flaying people for revenge and would watch how I was reacting. I paid attention to what thoughts and images emerged in the theater of my imagination while he spoke and told him what I observed. I was not trying to control or direct his thoughts or actions or mine. I was only trying to let him know as transparently as I could how what he was doing was directly affecting at least one person, me. My careful attention and frank responses did not mean at all that I remained unperturbed, let alone approved. I told him when he scared me, often, that his words and behavior were misguided and that he was going to get into serious trouble. He talked to me nonetheless because I listened and responded honestly, even though I was not encouraging in my responses. He trusted me despite, or more accurately because of, my objections. He was paranoid, not stupid. He knew his behavior was socially unacceptable. He knew that any decent person was likely to react with horror to his insane fantasies. He trusted me and would talk to me because that's how I reacted. There was no chance of understanding him without that trust. Trouble for him generally started in a bureaucracy such as a bank. He would enter an institution and attempt some simple task. He was looking to open an account, pay a bill, or fix some mistake. Now and then he encountered the kind of non-helpful person that everyone encounters now and again in such a place. That person would reject the ID he offered or require some information that was unnecessary and difficult to obtain. Sometimes, I suppose, the bureaucratic runaround was unavoidable, but sometimes it was unnecessarily complicated and petty misuses of bureaucratic power. My client was very attuned to such things. He was obsessed with honor. It was more important to him than safety, freedom, or belonging. Following that logic, because paranoid people are impeccably logical, he could never allow himself to be demeaned, insulted, put down even a little bit by anyone. Water did not roll off his back because of his rigid and inflexible attitude. My client's actions had already been subject to several restraining orders. Restraining orders work best, however, with the sort of person who would never require a restraining order. I will be your nightmare was his phrase of choice in such situations. I have wished intently that I could say something like that after encountering unnecessary bureaucratic obstacles, but it's generally best to let such things go. My client meant what he said, however, and sometimes he really did become people's nightmares. He was the bad guy in No Country for Old Men. He was the person you meet in the wrong place at the wrong time. If you mess with him, even accidentally, he was going to stalk you, remind you what you had done, and scare the living daylights out of you. He was no one to lie to. I told him the truth, and that cooled him off. When I was 19, I remember sitting in the dorm, and it was the end of the school year, and somebody had a case of beer. We were all drinking. And I was laughing at the right moments, and I was saying this comment and that comment, all these different things. And I don't know what came to me, but suddenly I realized that I was faking it. All the social interactions were not me. That these people that I was sitting with had no idea who I was, and that I had built a wall around myself that was just complete nonsense. It made me fit in, but it wasn't me. And I had shut myself in as much as I was trying to keep the world out. And it was that at that point, that I decided to embark upon trying to tell the truth. And thank goodness, my group of friends outside of school, I could tell them, hey, I'm trying to tell the truth. I want to quit lying. I want to be honest. And sometimes stuff is going to come out that I don't mean, that isn't real, that isn't true. And I'll need to take it back. And I just want you guys to, be kind with me. And they were, like I would say something and I would go, oh, sorry, that was a lie. And they'd just be like, okay, whatever. And eventually I got to the point where I was able to rewire my brain where I don't tell lies. Well, that's a lie. Every once in a while, a white lie will slip out that is, social lubricant, things like that. But about big important things, I'll say, I've lied 3 times maybe in the past week, if that. I don't think it's even that much. because I can keep track of them because they make me feel uncomfortable now. I don't like it. It sits uneasy with me. But like telling the guy who's trying to sell a security system, no, I've already got one. I do now, but at the time I didn't. But I just didn't want to deal with his sales pitch, that kind of thing. But yeah, when I finally learned to tell the truth as a habit, that's my first response to do, especially with my doctors. I'm completely and totally honest with my doctors. And there's a special trick you can do where if you need to tell them something sensitive, you say, can we talk off the record for a second? And then you can open up, the floodgates and say, look, I've been doing this. This is what happened, and it helps build that trust. And it's just wonderful that we have the opportunity to do that, because when trust happens, then they know if you're doing something out of character, that it's out of character. I don't know how to explain that very well, but if something's wrong with you, they can tell, oh, this isn't normal Pam. Normal Pam isn't like that. Normal Pam wouldn't do that. That sort of thing. You get a good reputation. And so when something bad happens, or you snap at somebody or something like that, they know you didn't mean it. And you can ask their forgiveness, and they're more willing to give it because they trust you. They know you. So, but I know a lot of people who, if they're in the habit of lying, it makes them very uncomfortable to try and flip the script on that. Because it is hard. And sometimes you have big secrets and you don't know how to deal with them. Dealing with the schizophrenic lady. You can tell a white lie, and save face for everybody, or you can tell the truth and keep your honor intact, that sort of thing. So we're going to go through this next section. I need to take a smoke first, but there's a song that Akira the Don did with, Samantha's in the house. Hello, Samantha. I'm going to pull up that one. Rule 8. Rule 8, tell the truth. We're going to put that up. There we go. We're going to have this for our interlude song in a half an hour. But yay, Samantha P's in the house. So, always with it. Is that somebody dancing on their head? I don't know what that. My eyesight is so terrible. So, but anyway. Hey, Pam Pam. Yeah, Pam Pam. So, all right, we're going to get into this next section, and then we'll take a break for smoking and the bathroom and all that good stuff. So, this is My Landlord. We're on page 207. I had a landlord around that time who had been president of a local biker gang. My wife, Tammy, and I lived next door to him in his parents' small apartment building. His girlfriend bore the marks of self-inflicted injuries characteristic of borderline personality disorder. She killed herself while we lived there. Ouch. Oh, cartwheel, Pam. Oh, that's cool. All right, it's a cartwheel. Dennis, large, strong French-Canadian with a gray beard, was a gifted amateur electrician. He had some artistic talent, too, and was supporting himself making laminated wood posters with custom neon lights. He was trying to stay sober after being released from jail. Still, every month or so, he would disappear on a days-long bender. He was one of those men who have a miraculous capacity for alcohol. He could drink 50 or 60 beer in a 2-day binge and remain standing the whole time. This may seem hard to believe, but it's true. I was doing research on familial alcoholism at the time, and it was not rare for my subjects to report their father's habitual consumption of 40 ounces of vodka a day. These patriarchs would buy one bottle every afternoon, Monday through Friday, then two on Saturday, to tide them over through the Sunday liquor store closures. Dennis had a little dog. Sometimes Tammy and I would hear Dennis and the dog out in the backyard at 4 a.m. during one of Dennis's marathon drinking sessions, both of them howling madly at the moon. Now and then, on occasions like that, Dennis would drink up every cent he had saved. Then he would show up at our apartment. We would hear a knock at night. Dennis would be at the door, swaying precipitously upright and miraculously conscious. He would be standing there, toaster, microwave, or poster in hand. He wanted to sell these things to me so that he could keep on drinking. I bought a few things like this, pretending like I was being charitable. Eventually, Tammy convinced me that I couldn't do it anymore. It made her nervous, and it was bad for Dennis, whom she liked. Reasonable and even necessary as her request was, it still placed me in a tricky situation. What do you say to a severely intoxicated, violent-prone, ex-biker gang president with your patchy English when he tries to sell his microwave to you at your open door at 2 a.m? This was a question even more difficult than those presented by the institutionalized patient or the paranoid player, but the answer was the same, the truth. But you bloody well know what the truth is. Dennis knocked again soon after my wife and I had talked. He looked at me in the direct, skeptical, narrow-eyed manner characteristic of the tough, heavy-drinking man who is no stranger to trouble. That look means, prove your innocence. Weaving slightly back and forth, he asked politely if I might be interested in purchasing his toaster. I rid myself to the bottom of my soul of primate dominance, motivations, and moral superiority. I told him as directly and as carefully as I could that I would not. I was playing no tricks. In that moment, I wasn't an educated, Anglophone, fortunate, upwardly mobile young man. He wasn't an ex-con Quebecois biker with a blood alcohol level of 0.24. No, we were two men of goodwill, trying to help each other out in our common struggle to do the right thing. I said that he told me he was trying to quit drinking. I said that it would not be good for him if I provided him with more money. I said that he made Tammy, whom he respected, nervous when he came over so drunk and so late and tried to sell me things. He glared seriously at me without speaking for about 15 seconds. That was plenty long enough. He was watching, I knew, for any micro-expressions revealing sarcasm, deceit, contempt, or self-congratulations. But I had thought it through carefully, and I had said only things that I truly mean. I had chosen my words carefully, traversing a treacherous swamp, feeling out a partly submerged stone path. Dennis turned and left. Not only that, he remembered our conversation despite his state of professional level intoxication. He didn't try to sell me anything again. Our relationship, which was quite good given the great cultural gaps between us, became even more solid. Taking the easy way out or telling the truth, those are not merely two different choices. They are the different pathways through life. They are utterly different ways of existing. So, are we? No, I'm only 10 minutes in. We can keep going. Manipulate the world. You can use words to manipulate the world into delivering what you want. This is what it means to act politely. This is spin. It's the specialty of unscrupulous marketers, salesmen, advertisers, pickup artists, slogan-possessed utopians, and psychopaths. It's the speech people engage in when they attempt to influence and manipulate others. It's what universities It's what university students do when they write an essay to please the professor instead of articulating and clarifying their own ideas. It's what everyone does when they want something and decide to falsify themselves to please and it's scheming and it's sloganeering and propaganda. To conduct life like this is to become possessed by some ill-formed desire and then to craft speech and action in a manner that appears likely rationally to bring about that end. Typical calculated ends might include to impose my ideological beliefs, to prove that I am or was right, to appear competent, or its twin, to garner credit for others' actions, to be promoted, to attract the lion's share of attention, to ensure that everyone likes me, to garner the benefit of martyrdom, to justify my cynicism, to rationalize my antisocial outlook, to minimize immediate conflict, to maintain my naivete, to capitalize on my vulnerability, to always appear as the sainted one, or, and this is particularly evil, to always appear as, to ensure that it is always my unloved child's fault. Ooh, that is an evil one. These are examples of what Sigmund Freud's compatriot, a lesser-known Austrian psychologist, Alfred Adler, calls life lies. Sometimes living a life lie is attempting to manipulate reality with perception, thought, and actions so that only some narrowly desired and predefined outcome is allowed to exist. Narcissists do this a lot. A life lived in this manner is based consciously or unconsciously on two premises. The first is that current knowledge is sufficient to define what is good unquestionably far into the future. The second is that reality would be unbearable if left to its own devices. The first presumption is philosophically unjustifiable. What you are currently aiming at might not be worth attaining, just as what you are currently doing might be an error. The second is even worse. It is valid only if reality is intrinsically intolerable and simultaneously something that can be successfully manipulated and distorted. Speaking and thinking such requires the arrogance and certainty of the English poet John Milton's genius identified with Satan, God's highest angel gone most spectacularly wrong. The faculty of rationality inclines dangerously to pride. All I know is all that needs to be known. Pride falls in love with its own creation and tries to make them absolute. That was a tough paragraph. I don't know if I got all of that. Are there any questions from the class? So I'm still stuck on that thing from the previous page. To ensure that it is always my unloved child's fault. I've been through that. So, get your parents blaming you for being late when they were the ones who were dawdling and that kind of thing. I've seen people define their utopia and then bend their lives into knots trying to make it a reality. A left-leaning student adopts a trendy, anti-authoritarian stance and spends the next 20 years working resentfully to topple the windmills of his imagination. An 18-year-old decides arbitrarily that she wants to retire at 52. She works for 3 decades to make that happen, failing to notice that she made that decision when she was little more than a child. What did she know about her 52-year-old self when still a teenager? Even now, many years later, she has only the vaguest low-resolution idea of her post-work Eden. She refuses to notice. What did her life mean if that initial goal was wrong? She's afraid of opening Pandora's box where all the troubles of the world reside. But hope is in there too. Instead, she wraps her life to fit the fantasies of a sheltered adolescent. A naively formulated goal transmutes with time into the sinister form of the life lie. One 40-something client told me his vision, formulated by his younger self. I see myself retired, sitting on a tropical beach, drinking margaritas in the sunshine. That's not a plan. That's a travel poster. After 8 margaritas, you're fit only to await the hangover. After 3 weeks of margarita-filled days, if you have any sense, you're bored stiff and self-disgusted. In a year or less, you're pathetic. It's just not a sustainable approach to later life. This kind of oversimplification and falsification is particularly typical of ideologues. They adopt a single axiom. Government is bad, immigration is bad, capitalism is bad, patriarchy is bad. They believe they filter and screen their experiences and insist even more narrowly that everything can be explained by that axiom. They believe narcissistically, underneath all that bad theory, that the world could be put right if only they held the controls. Hey, look who wandered in. A wandering violin mantis. Glad you're with us. So, awesome. There is another fundamental problem, too, with the life lie, particularly when it is based on avoidance. A sin of commission occurs when you do something you know to be wrong. A sin of omission occurs when you let something bad happen when you could have done something to stop it. The former is regarded classically as more serious than the latter, than avoidance. I'm not so sure. Consider the person who insists that everything is right in her life. She avoids conflict and smiles and does what she is asked to do. She finds a niche and hides in it. She does not question authority or put her own ideas forward and does not complain when mistreated. She strives for invisibility like a fish in the center of a swarming school, but the secret unrest gnaws at her heart. She is still suffering because life is suffering. She is lonesome and isolated and unfulfilled. But her obedience and self-obliteration eliminate all the meaning from her life. She has become nothing but a slave, a tool for others to exploit. She does not get what she wants or needs because doing so would mean speaking her mind. So there is nothing of value in her existence to counterbalance life's troubles, and that makes her sick. It might be the noisy troublemakers who disappear first when the intuition you serve falters and shrinks, but it's the invisible who will be sacrificed next. Someone hiding is not someone vital. Vitality requires original contribution. Hiding also does not save the conforming and conventional from disease, insanity, death, and taxes. And hiding from others also means suppressing and hiding the potentials of the unrealized self. And that's the problem. If you reveal yourself to others, you cannot reveal. If you will not reveal yourself to others, you cannot reveal yourself to yourself. This is like I was talking about with the wall. I built up a wall, and people didn't know me, and I didn't know me, and I was hiding from the world behind this facade. That does not only mean that you suppress who you are, although it also means that. It means so much of what you could be will never be forced by necessity to come forward. This is a biological truth as well as a conceptual truth. When you explore boldly, when you voluntarily confront the unknown, you gather information and build your renewed self out of that information. That is the conceptual element. However, research has recently discovered that new genes in the central nervous nervous system turn themselves on when an organism is placed or places itself in a new situation. These genes code for new proteins. These proteins are the building blocks for new structures in the brain. This means that a lot of you is still nascent in the most physical of senses and will not be called forth by stasis. You have to say something, go somewhere, and do things to get turned on. And if not, you remain incomplete, and life is too hard for anyone incomplete. Now that's something I know about dealing with people who are really depressed and have suicidal ideation. Is get them outside of the four walls of their house, get them moving, even if it's just in a car. If they can't walk or something like that, get them moving and get food in them. So those are the three things you do: get them out of the house, get them moving, get food in them, and you'll find that because it's a new sensation. Getting out of the house, driving around to places they haven't been, it gets them out of that headspace. And it allows them to think more rationally and more like the world isn't coming to an end. So, if you say no to your boss or to your spouse or to your mother when it needs to be said, then you transform yourself into someone who can say no when it needs to be said. If you say yes when no needs to be said, however, you transform yourself into someone who can only say yes, even when it is very clearly time to say no. If you ever wonder how perfectly ordinary, decent people could find themselves doing terrible things in the Gulag camp guards did, you now have your answer. By the time no seriously needed to be said, there was no one left capable of saying it. If you betray yourself, if you say untrue things, if you act out a lie, you weaken your character. If you have a weak character, then adversity will mow you down when it appears, as it will, inevitably. You will hide, but there will be no place left to hide, and then you will find yourself doing terrible things. Only the most cynical, hopeless philosophy insists that reality could be improved through falsification. Such a philosophy judges being and becoming alike and deems them flawed. It denounces truth as insufficient, and the honest man is deluded. It is a philosophy that both brings about and then justifies the endemic corruption of the world. It is not vision as such, and not a plan devised to achieve vision. That is at the fault of under such circumstances. A vision of the future, the desirable future, is necessary. Such a vision links action taken now with important long-term foundational values. It lends actions in the present significance and importance. It provides a frame limiting uncertainty and anxiety. It's not vision. Instead, it's willful blindness. It's the worst sort of lie. It's subtle. It avails itself of easy rationalization. Willful blindness is the refusal to know something that could be known. It's refusal to admit that the knocking sounds means someone's at the door. It's the refusal to acknowledge the 800-pound gorilla in the room, the elephant under the carpet, the skeleton in the closet. It's refusal to admit to error while pursuing the plan. Every game has rules. Some of the most important rules are implicit. You accept them merely by deciding to play the game. The first of these rules is that the game is important. If it wasn't important, you wouldn't be playing it. Playing a game defines it as important. The second is that moves undertaken during the game are valid if they help you win. If you make a move and it isn't helping you win, then by definition, it's a bad move. You need to try something different. You remember the old joke: insanity is doing the same thing over and over again while expecting different results. If you're lucky and you fail and you try something new, you move ahead. If that doesn't work, you try something different again. A minor modification will suffice in fortunate circumstances. It is therefore prudent to begin with small changes and see if they help. Sometimes, however, the entire hierarchy of values is faulty and the whole edifice has to be abandoned. The whole game must be changed. That's a revolution, with all the chaos and terror of a revolution. It's not something to be engaged in lightly, but it's sometimes necessary. Error necessitates sacrifice to correct it, and serious error necessitates serious sacrifice. To accept the truth means to sacrifice. And if you have rejected the truth for a long time, then you've run up a dangerously large sacrificial debt. Forest fires burn out dead wood and return trapped elements to the soil. Sometimes, however, fires are suppressed artificially. That does not stop the dead wood from accumulating. Sooner or later, a fire will start. When it does, it will burn so hot that everything will be destroyed, even the soil in which the forest grows. The prideful, rational mind, comfortable with its certainty, enamored with its own brilliance, is easily tempted to ignore error and to sweep dirt under the rug. Literally, existential philosophers, beginning with Soren Kierkegaard, conceived of this mode of being as inauthentic. An inauthentic person continues to perceive and act in ways his own experience has demonstrated false. He does not speak with his own voice. Did what I want happen? No. Then my aim or my methods were wrong. I still have something to learn. That is the voice of authenticity. Did what I want happen? No. Then the world is unfair. People are jealous and too stupid to understand it's the fault of someone else. That's the voice of inauthenticity. It is not too far from there to they should be stopped, or they must be hurt, or they must be destroyed. Whenever you hear about something incomprehensibly brutal, such ideas have manifested themselves. Where are we in time? I'm going to do one more paragraph. There is no blaming any of this on unconsciousness either, or on repression. When the individual lies, he knows it. He may blind himself to the consequences of his actions. He may fail to analyze and articulate his past so that he does not understand. He may even forget that he lied and so be unconscious of that fact. But he was conscious in the present during the commission of each error and the omission of each responsibility. At that moment, he knew what he was up to, and the sins of the inauthentic individual compound and corrupt the state. All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break there for anybody who needs to go to the bathroom, and we are going to play our break time song. So here we go, and pay attention to the end of this song. That's really what's most important about it. There we go. Jordan Peterson, share and play.
One way of conceptualizing yourself is that you're one speck of dust among 7 billion. And when you conceptualize yourself that way, you might think, well, what difference does it make what I say or do? And that's actually quite convenient for you, because if it doesn't matter what you say or do, then you don't have any responsibility and you can do whatever you want. The price you pay for that is a bit of nihilism, but if you don't have to shoulder any responsibility, that's a small price to pay. The other way of looking at it, and this is actually the accurate way of looking at it, is that you're in a network. You're a node in a network, and so you can do a little bit of arithmetic very rapidly and just figure out how powerful you are. You know 1,000 people. They know 1,000 people. That means that you're one person away from 1 million people and 2 persons away from 1 billion people. And you're the center of that network. And now the way networks work is that information propagates in a networked manner. So don't underestimate the power of your speech. Don't underestimate the power of truth. There's nothing more powerful. Tell the truth. Tell Tell the truth. 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 Or at least don't lie. That's a start. Tell the truth. 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 Or at least don't lie. That's a start. Now, in order to speak what you might regard as the truth, you have to let go of the outcome. You have to think, all right, I'm going to say what I think. Stupid as I am, biased as I am, ignorant as I am, I'm going to state what I think as clearly as I can. And I'm going to live with the consequences no matter what they are. Now, the reason you think that, that's an element of faith. The idea is that nothing brings a better world into being than the stated truth. Now, you might have to pay a price for that, but that's fine. You're going to pay a price for every bloody thing you do and everything you don't do. You don't get to choose to not pay a price. You get to choose which poison you're going to take. That's it. Tell the truth. 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 Or at least don't lie. That's a start. Tell the truth. 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 Or at least don't lie. That's a start. It's almost impossible to provide people with enough protection so that they feel safe to speak. Okay, so we'll address that directly. It is not safe to speak. And it never will be. But the thing you got to keep in mind is that it's even less safe not to speak. Right? It's a balance of risks. It's like you want to pay the price for being who you are and stating your mode of being in the world, or do you want to pay the price for being a bloody serf, one that's enslaved him or herself? Well, that's a major price, man. That thing unfolds over decades, and you'll just be a miserable worm at the end of about 20 years of that, right? No self-respect, no power, no ability to voice your opinions, nothing left but resentment because everyone's against you. Say what you think carefully. Pay attention to your words. But it's a price you want to pay if you're willing to believe that truth is the cornerstone of society. In the most real sense, if you're willing to take that leap, then tell the truth and see what happens. Tell the truth. 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 Or at least don't lie. That's a start. Tell the truth. 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 Or at least don't lie. That's a start. You think, well, I'll lie and I'll get away with it. It's like, no, you won't. You cannot get away with warping the structure of being. It's like, well, I can lie and get away with it. It's like, I see. Here's your theory. There's all this reality around you that you don't comprehend at all. And there's not that much of you. There's a lot of it. And you're going to do something that isn't in harmony with that. And it's going to work. That's your theory.
And we are back. So that last part of the song there is what I love. There's a little bit of you, and there's a whole lot of reality. And you think you're going to be able to twist the fabric of reality and get away with it. That's your theory. You know, you have to work in harmony with existence. And that means telling the truth. So, all right. Because otherwise, I mean, you can't build a life on lies. It's the whole thing out of the Bible. That's sand. You know, you can't build a house on sand. You have to build it on the rock of truth. So, yeah. Let's get back in here. Chapter 8. All right. Someone power hungry makes a new rule at your workplace. It's unnecessary. It's counterproductive. It's an irritant. It removes some of the pleasures and meaning from your work, but you tell yourself it isn't all right. It's all right. It's not worth complaining about. Then it happens again. You've already trained yourself to allow such things by failing to react the first time. You're a little less courageous. Your opponent, unopposed, is a little bit stronger. The institution is a little bit more corrupt. The process of bureaucratic stagnation and oppression is underway, and you've contributed by pretending that it was okay. Why complain? Why not make a stand? If you do, other people, equally afraid to speak up, may come to your defense. And if not, maybe it's time for a revolution. Maybe you should find a job somewhere else where your soul is less in danger from corruption. For what shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeit his soul? That's Mark 8:36. One of the major contributions of Alexander Solzhenitsyn's masterwork, The Gulag Archipelago, was his analysis of the direct causal relationship between the pathology of the Soviets' prison work camp dependent state, where millions suffered and died, and the almost universal proclivity of the Soviet citizen to falsify his own day-to-day personal experience, deny his own state-induced suffering, and thereby prop up the dictates of the rational, ideologically possessed communist system. It was this bad faith, this denial, that in Solzhenitsyn's opinion aided and abetted the great paranoid mass murderer Joseph Stalin in his crimes. Solzhenitsyn wrote the truth, his truth, hard-learned through his own experience in the camps, exposing the lies of the Soviet state. No educated person dared defend that ideology again after Solzhenitsyn published the Gulag Archipelago. No one would ever say again what Stalin did. That was not true communism. I think that's sarcasm. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Nazi concentration camp survivor who wrote the classic Man's Search for Meaning, drew a similar social psychological conclusion. Deceitful, inauthentic individual existence is the precursor to social totalitarianism. Sigmund Freud, for his part, analogously believed that repression, put in quotes, repression, contributed in a non-trivial manner to the development of mental illnesses, and the difference between repression of truth and a lie is a matter of degree, not kind. Alfred Adler knew it was lies that bred sickness. C.G. Jung knew that moral problems plagued his patients and that such problems were caused by untruth. All of these thinkers, all centrally concerned with the pathology, both individual and cultural, came to the same conclusion. Lies warp the structure of being. Underneath corruption, the soul and the state alike, and one form of corruption. Untruth corrupts. I read that wrong. Untruth corrupts the soul and the state alike, and one form of corruption feeds the other. I mean, we see it happen on Wall Street all the time. Selling stocks, being in Wall Street, being a trader is a young man's game because it takes all that adrenaline, and as you get older, you just age out of it. You can't handle that stress level. And so, like every 11 years or so, there'll be a market crash because you get far away enough from the last crash that nobody in the situation understands what happened to cause the crash in the first place. And just like in The Great Short, you find out that the crash is built upon lying, cheating, stealing. And we just keep doing it every 11 years, market crash, every 11 years, because people think I can warp the structure of being and get away with it. And you can't. It's just, do you take your poison now or later? And when you do it later, you've built up so much detritus that when it goes off, it's going to go off big and it's going to hurt a lot of people. So, yeah, I mean, we see it time and time again. The last of my soda. So, I have repeatedly observed the transformation of mere existential misery into outright hell by betrayal and deceit. The barely manageable crisis of a parent's terminal illness can be turned, for example, into something awful beyond description by the unseemly and petty squabbling of the sufferer's adult children. Obsessed by the unresolved past, they gather like ghouls around the deathbed, forcing tragedy into an unholy dalliance with cowardice and resentment. The inability of a son to thrive independently is exploited by a mother bent on shielding her child from all disappointment and pain. He never leaves, and she is never lonely. It's an evil conspiracy forged slowly as the pathology unfolds by thousands of knowing winks and nods. She plays the martyr, doomed to support her son, and garners nourishing sympathy like a vampire from supporting friends. He broods in his basement, imagining himself oppressed. He fantasizes with delight about the havoc he may wreak on the world that rejected him for his cowardice, awkwardness, and inability. And sometimes he wreaks precisely that havoc, and everyone asks why. They could know, but refuse to. Even well-lived lives can, of course, be warped and hurt and twisted by illness and infirmity and uncontrollable catastrophe. Depression, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia, like cancer, all involve biological factors beyond the individual's immediate control. The difficulties intrinsic to life itself are sufficient to weaken and overwhelm each of us, pushing us beyond our limits, breaking us at our weakest point. Not even the best lived life provides an absolute defense against vulnerability. But the family that fights in the ruins of their earthquake-devastated dwelling place is much less likely to rebuild than a family made strong by mutual trust and devotion. Any natural weakness or existential challenge, no matter how minor, can be magnified into a serious crisis with enough deceit in the individual family or culture. The honest human spirit may continually fail in its attempts to bring about paradise on earth. It may manage, however, to reduce the suffering attendant on existence to a bearable level. The tragedy of being is the consequence of our limitations and the vulnerability defining human experience. It may even be the price we pay for being itself, since existence must be limited to be at all. I have seen a husband adapt honestly and courageously while his wife descended into terminal dementia. He made necessary adjustments step by step. He accepted help when he needed it. He refused to deny her sad deterioration, and in that manner adapted gracefully to it. I saw the family and the same woman come together in a supporting and sustaining manner as she lay dying and gain newfound connections with each other, brothers, sisters, grandchildren, and father, as partial but genuine compensation for their loss. I have seen my teenage daughter live through the destruction of her hip and ankle and survive 2 years of continual intense pain and emerge with her spirit intact. I watched her younger brother voluntarily and without resentment sacrifice many opportunities for friendship and social engagement to stand by her and with us while she suffered. With love, encouragement, and character intact, a human being can be resilient beyond imagining. What cannot be borne, however, is the absolute ruin produced by tragedy and deception. The capacity of the rational mind to deceive, manipulate, scheme, trick, falsify, minimize, mislead, betray, prevaricate, deny, omit, rationalize, bias, exaggerate, and obscure is so endless, so remarkable, that centuries of pre-scientific thought, concentrating on clarifying the nature of moral endeavor, regarded it as positively demonic. This is not because of rationality itself as a process. The process can produce clarity and progress. It's because rationality is subject to the single worst temptation to raise what it knows now to the status of an absolute. We can turn to the great poet John Milton once again to clarify just what that means. Over thousands of years of history, the Western world wrapped a dreamlike fantasy about the nature of evil around its central religious core. That fantasy had a protagonist, an adversarial personality, absolutely dedicated to the corruption of being. Milton took it upon himself to organize, dramatize, and articulate the essence of this collective dream and gave it life in the figure of Satan, Lucifer, the light bearer. He writes of Lucifer's primal temptation and its immediate consequences. And this is getting into the Milton. He trusted to have equaled the Most High if he opposed and with ambitious aim against the throne and monarchy of God, raised impious war in heaven and battle proud with vain attempt. Him the almighty power hurled headlong, flaming from the ethereal sky, with hideous ruin and combustion down to bottomless perdition, there to dwell in adamantine chains and penal fire. That did not help clarify. Lucifer, in Milton's eye, the spirit of reason, was the most wondrous angel brought forth from the void by God. This can be read psychologically. Reason is something alive. It lives in all of us. It's older than any of us. It's best understood as a personality, not a faculty. It has its aims and its temptations and its weaknesses. It flies higher and sees farther than any other spirit. But reason falls in love with itself and worse. It falls in love with its own productions. It elevates them and worships them as absolutes. Lucifer is therefore the spirit of totalitarianism. He is flung from heaven into hell because of such elevation. Such rebellion against the highest and incomprehensible inevitably produces hell. To say it again, it is the greatest temptation of the rational faculty to glorify its own capacity and its own productions and to claim that, in the face of its theories, nothing transcendent or outside of its domain need exist. That's rough. This means that all important facts have been discovered. This means that nothing important remains unknown. But most importantly, it means denial of the necessity for courageous individual confrontation with being. What is going to save you? The totalitarian says, in essence, you must rely on faith in what you already know. But that's not what saves. What saves is the willingness to learn from what you don't know. That is faith in the possibility of human transformation. That is faith in the sacrifice of the current self for the self that could be. The totalitarian denies the necessity for the individual to take ultimate responsibility for being. That denial is the meaning of rebellion against the Most High. That is what totalitarian means. Everything that needs to be discovered has been discovered. Everything will unfold precisely as planned. All problems will vanish forever once the perfect system is accepted. Milton's great poem was a philosophy. Was prophecy. As rationality rose ascendant from the ashes of Christianity, the great threat of total systems accompanied it. And I've seen this in studying science. At one point they thought And then my teacher told me this, like 50 years ago, no doctor wanted to go into infectious diseases because they thought they had discovered all of them, and it was just a matter of time before they cured all infectious diseases, you know. And then AIDS pops on the scene, and suddenly infectious diseases is new and sexy again, and everybody wants to go in and learn about it. But at one point, they thought that there would be no new diseases on the horizon, that they had figured out everything they needed to know. And in doing so, less doctors went into the field, less doctors were there when this new thing cropped up. And so there were fewer people at exactly the time where more people were needed. But this idea that, we can know everything, the symbol of communism, the hammer and sickle, that's all you need. All the world is in complete order. The workers unite, the ones of the farms and the ones of the mines, industry and agriculture. You master those two things and you have mastered the world. Well, no, not exactly. Because, God will always throw us curveballs. Life will always throw us curveballs. It's just, it boggles my mind that anybody ever thought we could know everything. There's so much reality out there. We haven't even scratched the surface on most of it. And it's this arrogance of rationality that gets us into trouble every single time. So, a rationality rose ascendant from the ashes of Christianity. The great threat of total systems accompanied it. Communism, in particular, was attractive not so much to oppressed workers, its hypothetical beneficiaries, but to intellectuals, to those whose arrogant pride and intellect assured them they were always right. But the promised utopia never emerged. Instead, humanity experienced the inferno of Stalinist Russia and Mao's China and Pol Pot's Cambodia. We can add Venezuela in there. And the citizens of those states were required to betray their own experience, turn against their fellow citizens, and die in the tens of millions. There's an old Soviet joke. An American dies and goes to hell. Satan himself shows him around. They pass a large cauldron. The American peers in. It's full of suffering souls, burning in hot pitch. As they struggle to leave the pot, the low-ranking devils sitting on the rim pitchfork them back in. The American is properly shocked. Satan says, "That's where we put sinful Englishmen." The tour continues. Soon the duo approaches a second cauldron. It's slightly larger and slightly hotter. The American peers in. It's also full of suffering souls, all wearing berets. Devils are pitchforking would-be escapees back into the cauldron as well. That's where we put sinful Frenchmen, Satan says. In the distance is a third cauldron. It's much bigger, glowing, white hot. The American can barely get near it. Nonetheless, at Satan's insistence, he approaches it and peers in. It's absolutely packed with souls, barely visible under the surface of the boiling liquid. Now and then, however, one clambers out of the pitch and desperately reaches for the rim. Oddly, there are no devils sitting on the edge of this giant pot, but the clamberer disappears back under the surface anyway. The American asks, "Why are there no demons here to keep everyone from escaping?" Satan replies, "This is where we put the Russians. If one tries to escape, the other pulls him back in." Milton believed that stubborn refusal to change in the face of error not only meant rejection from heaven and subsequent degeneration into an ever-deepening hell, but the rejection of redemption itself. Satan knows full well that even if he were willing to seek reconciliation and God willing to grant it, he would only rebel again because he will not change. Perhaps this is the prideful stubbornness that constitutes the mysterious, unforgivable sin against the Holy Ghost. Farewell, happy fields, where joy forever dwells. Hail horrors, hail infernal world, and thou profoundest hell, receive thy new possessor, one who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time. Mary Lou, can I help you?
Yeah, I just want to go next door and see if John is
Oh, sure.
somebody home.
All right, guys, I'm going to help Mary Lou go home. So I'm going to put on this new one by, what is it? What's his name? Akira the Dawn.
Can't help me out.
Happiness is fleeting, and suffering requires a sustaining need. Happiness is fleeting, and suffering requires a sustaining need. That place where the meaning and the fact are conjoined, that's the proper place to lecture from. What you want to do as an academic is tell your students about something that you've encountered that you've fallen in love with, and to communicate the love that you have for that. And not to say, well, you should read this book, but to say, well, here's this book, and here's what it can open up for you, and this is how it does it. This is what you'll gain from it. There's something in it that sounds unbelievable utility, and you have to believe that in order to communicate it. To communicate that commitment you have to beauty and to truth and to literature, it isn't enough to say what they are and to transmit them. It's to manifest yourself as a living part of that tradition, and to show yourself thereby as a model for living out what that tradition represents, and to show that that's so much better than like a short-term pleasure-seeking nihilism. They're not even in the same conceptual universe, and people are far more open to that. They know already. People know, especially when they're hurt. They know that happiness is fleeting, and suffering requires a sustaining need. They know that happiness is fleeting, and that suffering requires a sustaining need. King's Chapel, the people who started it didn't live to see its completion. They were driven by this nobility of transcendent vision, and they produced these enduring forms out of the bloody misery of history. We've erected all this spectacular infrastructure that we're so fortunate to be part of. And none of that gratitude is taught, hardly not taught, because people have no sense of the absolute catastrophe of history. It's like nasty, brutish, and short. The simplest and most likely social circumstances. Catastrophe punctuated by hell. And to see that not happening in a sustained manner constantly, and to see things improving around us, and to be reliable in that manner, and then not to be grateful for that, it's an unbelievable combination of ignorance, ingratitude, and willful blindness. And to not instill that sense in young people, for them to understand that they are standing on the bones of generations of people who suffered to make this possible, despite all their errors, and have brought this forward. Happiness is fleeting, and suffering requires a sustaining need. They know happiness is fleeting, and that suffering requires a sustaining need. We could have concentrated on building the future instead of expecting the past. You start in the world, if you have some wisdom and some humility, by taking the potential that lies dormant in front of you and interacting with it in the logos-like manner, with truth and with love, and by transforming that potential into whatever you can create out of it that's good. It won't be small if you do that. You can transform your whole household by transforming your room. You can transform your whole neighborhood by transforming your house. Like, these things spread very, very rapidly. And that is right there in front of you. People think they're impoverished, they don't have any opportunity. And the opportunity is hidden from them by their unwillingness to take the steps that are necessary to put what they could put in front of them in order, and to produce the beauty instead of the ugliness where they couldn't do that. And I don't think there is anything more powerful than that. That works. Happiness is free. And suffering requires the sustaining need. We know happiness is free. And that suffering requires the sustaining need. Happiness is free. And suffering requires the sustaining need. We know happiness is free. And that suffering requires the sustaining need. Everyone who's lived knows that. And so to say, well, here's a balm for the suffering, and it's profound and deep, and here's what it's meant to me, and here's how you can incorporate it into your life. People are absolutely starving for that, or dying of thirst for that.
Okay. Okay, Kevin Edwards is here. You need to sit at the front of the class because you're late. So yeah, Mary Lou got home, and she says good night to everybody. She waved. So yeah, we got to listen to a second song. And that's from Akira the Don's new album. He's just come out with a new one. So that's awesome. And yeah, y'all should go check it out. So, this is no afterlife fantasy. This is no perverse realm of post-existence torture for political enemies. This is an abstract idea, and abstractions are often more real than what they represent. The idea that hell exists in some metaphysical manner is not only ancient and pervasive, it's true. Hell is eternal. It has always existed. It exists now. It is the most barren, hopeless, and malevolent subdivision of the underworld of chaos where disappointed and resentful people forever dwell. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven. Here we may reign secure, and in my choice, to reign is worth ambition, though in hell, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Those who have lied enough in word and action live there, in hell, now. Take a walk down any busy urban street. Well, we don't have those anymore. Some places do. Keep your eyes open and pay attention. You will see people who are there now. These are the people whom you instinctively give a wide berth. These are the people who are immediately angered if you direct your gaze towards them, although sometimes they will instead turn away in shame. I saw a horribly damaged street alcoholic do exactly that in the presence of my younger daughter. He wanted to be above all, to avoid seeing his degraded state incontrovertibly reflected in her eyes. It is deceit that makes people miserable beyond what they can bear. It is deceit that fills human souls with resentment and vengefulness. It is deceit that produces the terrible suffering of mankind, the death camps of the Nazis, the torture chambers and genocides of Stalin, and that even greater monster, Mao. It was deceit that killed hundreds of millions of people in the 20th century. It was deceit that almost doomed civilization itself. It is deceit that still threatens us most profoundly today. The truth, instead. What happens if instead we decide to stop lying? What does this even mean? We are limited in our knowledge after all. We must make decisions here and now, even though the best means that even through the best means and the best goals can never be discerned with certainty. An aim and ambition provides the structure necessary for action. An aim provides a destination, a point of contrast against the present, and a framework within which all things can be evaluated. An aim defines progress and makes such progress exciting. An aim reduces anxiety because if you have no aim, everything can mean anything or nothing, and neither of those two options makes for a tranquil spirit. Thus, we have to think and plan and limit and posit in order to live at all. How then to envision the future and establish our direction without falling prey to the temptation of totalitarian certainty? Some reliance on tradition can help us establish our aims. It is reasonable to do what other people have always done, unless we have a very good reason not to. It is reasonable to become educated and work and find love and have a family. That is how culture maintains itself. But it is necessary to aim at your target, however traditional, with your eyes wide open. You have a direction, but it might be wrong. You have a plan, but it might be ill-formed. You may have been led astray by your own ignorance, and worse, by your own unrevealed corruption. You must make friends, therefore, with what you don't know instead of what you know. You must remain awake to catch yourself in the act. You must remove the beam in your own eye before you concern yourself with the mote in your brother's. And in this way, you strengthen your own spirit so it can tolerate the burden of existence, and you rejuvenate the state. The ancient Egyptians had already figured this out thousands of years ago, although their knowledge remained embodied in dramatic form. They worshipped Osiris, mythical founder of the state and the god of tradition. Osiris, however, was vulnerable to overthrow and banishment to the underworld by Set, his evil, scheming brother. The Egyptians represented in story the fact that social organizations ossify with time and tend towards willful blindness. Osiris would not see his brother's true character, even though he could have. Set waits and at an opportune moment attacks. He hacks Osiris into pieces and scatters the divine remains through the kingdom. He sends his brother's spirit to the underworld. He makes it very difficult for Osiris to pull himself back together. Fortunately, the great king did not have to deal with Set on his own. The Egyptians also worshipped Horus, the son of Osiris. Horus took the twin forms of a falcon, the most visually acute of all creatures, and the still famous hieroglyphic single Egyptian eye, as alluded to in Rule 7. Osiris is tradition, aged and willfully blind. Horus, his son, could and would, by contrast, see. Horus was the god of attention. That is not the same as rationality. Because he paid attention, Horus could perceive and triumph against the evils of Set, his uncle, albeit at great cost. When Horus confronts Set, they have a terrible battle. Before Set's defeat and banishment from the kingdom, he tears out one of his nephew's eyes. But eventually, victorious Horus takes back the eye. Then he does something truly unexpected. He journeys voluntarily into the underworld and gives the eye to his father. What does this mean? First, that the encounter with malevolence and evil is of sufficient terror to damage even the vision of a god. Second, that the attentive son can restore the vision of his father. Culture is always in a near dead state, even though it was established by the spirit of great people in the past. But the present is not the past. The wisdom of the past thus deteriorates or becomes outdated in proportion to the genuine difference between the conditions of the present and the past. That is a mere consequence of the passage of time and the change that passage inevitably brings. But it also can be the case that culture and wisdom is additionally vulnerable to corruption, to voluntary, willful blindness, and the Mephistophelian intrigue. Thus, the inevitable function decline of the institutions granted to us by our ancestors is sped along by our misbehavior, our missing of the mark in the present. It is our responsibility to see what is before our eyes courageously and learn from it, even if it seems horrible. Even if the horror of seeing it damages our consciousness and half blinds us. The act of seeing is particularly important when it challenges what we know and rely on, upsetting and destabilizing us. It is the act of seeing that informs the individual and updates the state. It was for this reason Nietzsche said that a man's worth was determined by how much truth he could tolerate. You are by no means only what you already know. You are also all that which you could know if only you would. Thus, you should never sacrifice what you could be for what you are. You should never give up the better that resides within for the security you already have, and certainly not when you have already caught a glimpse, an undeniable glimpse of something beyond. This is the problem that we have in dealing with the Constitution. The past is not the present, and there are problems that the founding fathers, could not envision. And you have that actually written into the Constitution in the Bill of Rights. I believe it's the 9th Amendment, where it says all the rights of man cannot be enumerated in these pages. And if the rights aren't written out here, they belong to the person. And then after the person, they belong to the state. And then after the state, they belong to the federal. So, but certain rights, certain human rights, they knew that they couldn't think of them all when they wrote the document. So they made the 9th Amendment as kind of a catch-all to say, if we didn't say it here, but you guys discover it later, that's cool. You guys just discovered that human right, that basic human right later, and it falls under the 9th. Sorry, we missed it. In the Christian tradition, Christ is identified with the Logos. The Logos is the Word of God. That word transformed chaos into order at the beginning of time. In his human form, Christ sacrificed himself voluntarily to the truth, to the good, to God. In consequence, he died and was reborn. The word that produces order from chaos sacrifices everything, even itself, to God. That single sentence, wise beyond comprehension, sums up Christianity. Every bit of learning is a little death. Every bit of new information challenges a previous conception, forcing it to dissolve into chaos before it can be reborn as something better. Sometimes such deaths virtually destroy us. In such cases, we may never recover, or if we do, we change a lot. A good friend of mine discovered that his wife of decades was having an affair. He didn't see it coming. It plunged him into a deep depression. He descended into the underworld. He told me at one point, I always thought that people who were depressed should just shake it off. I didn't have any idea what I was talking about. Eventually, he returned from the depths. In many ways, he's a new man, and perhaps a wiser and better man. He lost 40 pounds. He ran a marathon. He traveled to Africa and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. He chose rebirth over descent into hell. Now, I've been in hell with my chronic illness. I've been Oh, to some deep, dark places. And I am very changed from who I used to be and who I was on track to become in my 20s before this struck. And I've even dreamt of what I was like before and what I'm like now and the big difference. And yeah, I'm a hell of a lot wiser. There are some things that I wish I hadn't lost, but it was those things were born of naivety, and some of that naivety I almost wish, I don't know, I'm torn because sometimes it's necessary to believe in the impossible. Like the old timers will say, oh, that'll never happen, you'll never fly, that sort of thing, and then the Wright brothers come along and say, hold my beer. So in some ways, I wish I had that hold my beer attitude, watch me change the world. But on the other hand, I do like the wisdom of saying, oh, there's a lot of ways that this can go wrong, and there's a lot of ways that you can fall on your face. So you want to do this carefully. And that sort of thing. Instead of being the fool that's striding off the cliff to his great adventure, I feel more at home being, the hermit with his lamp, traveling through the snow and the darkness and things like that. So yeah, I get it. And yeah, depression is not something you just shake off, Set your ambitions, even if you are uncertain about what they should be. The better ambitions have to do with the development of character and ability rather than status and power. Status you can lose. You can carry character with you wherever you go, and it allows you to prevail against adversity. Knowing this, tie a rope to a boulder, pick up the great stone, heave it in front of you, and pull yourself towards it. Watch and observe while you move forward. Articulate your experience as clearly and carefully to yourself and others as you possibly can. In this manner, you will learn to proceed more effectively and efficiently towards your goal. And while you are doing this, do not lie, especially to yourself. If you pay attention to what you do and say, you can learn to feel a state of internal division and weakness when you are misbehaving and misspeaking. Yes, absolutely true. It makes you feel uncomfortable when you set out upon this journey of not telling lies anymore, telling the truth, that sort of thing. If your mind says, we can mistruth, you feel uncomfortable throughout your whole body. It's the most incredible thing. And you turn back and say, no, I don't want to feel like that. I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to suck it up right in this moment and go, okay, this is what reality is. I'm willing to own it right now, because if I try and weasel my way through this, not only may I have some consequence down the road that I don't want to deal with come my way, but in the moment, I know I'm betraying myself. I'm betraying my values, that sort of thing. It makes you uncomfortable with yourself. And so, yeah, you will learn to feel this, and you will feel better standing on virtue, standing on the truth. It closed up a hole in my soul, if I can put it that way. That there used to be sort of this gaping hole that I would try and fill with all these earthly things and everything like that. No, what I needed to do is I needed to fill it up from standing on virtue. And I just missed a whole bunch of chat. So, okay, Kevin Edwards worked. He went back to work. So thank you for saying goodbye to him, Mantis. Capitol, nowhere near the Capitol storming in Oklahoma. Oh my gosh, things going on. It's just crazy. I am not tuned into the news these days because it's too much. I can't stand the BS. My BS meter has tipped into the red, and I've got to focus on me and family, and stay away from all this chaos and everything else. It's just, I never thought I would live in the Soviet Union as a kid growing up, but we're heading that way, and it scares the hell out of me. It tell the truth. This is what's going to enable us to withstand that sort of tyranny. It's by calling out the emperor has no clothes, by saying no instead of yes, and standing up to those little corruptions that they want us to be involved in. And it could just be standing your ground in your neighborhood. Whatever it is, just stand your ground. Shaman says, I hear you, Pam. What's news? Bad news is news. Yeah. Wandering says, I didn't hear about that either. Yeah. So it's crazy town out there, and I'm not going to be involved in it. I'm not going to add to it. That's why I've put my out bullying the internet bullies on hold. It's like, no, I got to stop this. I got to do it a different way. I got to step back and be the mature one in the situation, because this has just gotten out of hand. This has gotten so out of hand. And we're heading to a dark place if we don't set things to right. And so I'm just hoping that, by each truth that I tell, it sends out a little ripple, like that node in the network. If we keep speaking the truth, eventually it will ripple outward to the places that it needs to be so that truth can prevail. Right now we're under mob rule. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. So if you pay attention to what you do and say, you can learn to feel a state of internal division and weakness when you are misbehaving and misspeaking. It's an embodied sensation, not a thought. I experienced an internal sensation of sinking and division rather than solidarity and strength when I am incautious with my acts and words. It seems to be centered around my solar plexus, where a large knot of nervous tissue resides. I learned to recognize when I was lying, in fact, by noticing this sinking and division, and then inferring the presence of a lie. It often took me a long time to ferret out the deception. Sometimes I was using words for appearance. Sometimes I was trying to disguise my own true ignorance of the topic at hand. Sometimes I was using the words of others to avoid responsibility of thinking for myself. If you pay attention when you are seeking something, you will move towards your goal. More importantly, however, you will acquire the information that allows your goal itself to transform. A totalitarian never asks, what if my current ambition is in error? He treats it instead as the absolute. It becomes his God. For all intents and purposes, it constitutes his highest value. It regulates his emotions and motivation states and determines his thoughts. All people serve their ambition. In that matter, there are no atheists. There are only people who know and don't know what God they serve. If you bend everything totally, blindly, and willfully towards the attainment of a goal, and only that goal, you will never be able to discover if another goal would serve you and the world better. If you grasp onto things like the monkey or the raccoon trap, either way, you set a bunch of treats out around the trap, and then you set a bunch of treats in the trap, and they can fit their paw in and grab, but they can't get it out. The treats are more important than their own life. They can't see that there's a greater goal here. It is this that you sacrifice if you do not tell the truth. If instead you tell the truth, your values transform as you progress. If you allow yourself to be informed by the reality manifesting itself as you struggle forward, your notions of what is important will change. You will reorient yourself, sometimes gradually, sometimes suddenly and radically. Imagine you go to engineering school because that is what your parents desire, but it's not what you want. Working at cross purposes to your own wishes, you will find yourself unmotivated and failing. You will struggle to concentrate and discipline yourself, but it will not work. Your soul will reject the tyranny of your will. How else could that be said? Why are you complying? You may or may not want to disappoint your parents. You may not want to disappoint your parents, although if you fail, you will do exactly that. You may lack the courage for the conflict necessary to free yourself. You may not want to sacrifice your childish belief in parental omniscience, wishing devoutly to continue believing that there is someone who knows better than you know yourself and who knows all about the world. You want to be shielded in this manner from the stark existential aloneness of individual being and its attendant responsibility. This is all very common and understandable, but you suffer because you are truly not meant to be an engineer. One day you've had enough. You drop out. You disappoint your parents. You learn to live with that. You consult only yourself, even though that means you must rely on your own decisions. You take a philosophy degree. You accept the burden of your own mistakes. You become your own person. By rejecting your father's vision, you develop your own. And then, as your parents age, you become an adult enough to be there for them when they come to need you. They win too, but both victories had to be purchased at the cost of conflict engendered by your truth. As Matthew 10:34 has it, citing Christ, emphasizing the role of spoken truth, think not that I have come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. As you continue to live in accordance with the truth as it reveals itself to you, you will have to accept and deal with the conflicts that modes of being will generate. If you do so, you will continue to mature and become more responsible in small ways. Don't underestimate their importance. And enlarge. You will ever more closely approach your newer and more wisely formulated goals and become even wiser in their formulation when you discover and rectify your inevitable errors. Your conception of what is important will become more and more appropriate as you incorporate the wisdom of your experience. You will quit wildly oscillating and walk ever more directly towards the good, a good you could never have comprehended if you had insisted, despite all evidence, that you were right, absolutely right, at the beginning. Oh, man. This is a tough chapter. Is anybody else having a tough time with this chapter? I can understand why people stop in this chapter. These paragraphs are thick. I mean, they're not long, but the meaning in there, the stuff that you got to unpack, it's just, it's thick. But I mean, the college experience about the engineer, I had that. The only way, I'm missing the chat here. Over here, it's the war of the narratives, and it's hard to find perspective anyway. The only way to win and keep sanity is not to play. Yep. The shaman is a realized man who has seen through the game. Yes, yes, yes. So his story about the engineer kind of happened to me. I went pre-med, based on my SAT scores. My dad was just ecstatic, and he's like, "Oh, you need to go pre-med." And I went pre-med, and it was killing me. And it wasn't until and it was right before my chemistry final, I had a cyst rupture on my ovary. and it caused me great pain and, emergency surgery, that sort of thing. And, but one of the things that came out of it was, I wasn't going to be pre-med anymore. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go in that direction. And so I looked at my grades and I'm like, okay, what am I just naturally getting good grades in? And that'll be my new aim. And it was English. And so it became writing. And that led me to here. If I were, first off, if I were a doctor, I would have gotten so sick that I wouldn't have been able to survive pre-med or any of that. At some point, eventually, I would have dropped out. And maybe after spending, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on a career that would never materialize, because at 29, I was done. But it was that surgery that happened that made me realize, no, I can't be pushing myself to do something because somebody else said so. Because it would be my dad would get all sorts of, oh, your daughter, the doctor, he was looking at it from his point of view. He wasn't looking at it from my point of view and my perspective and my needs and things like that. So, when I switched to my English degree, not only was I happier, but I was actually able to graduate, which, my health was declining rapidly. But I got through and my health was able to get better because of that, to release that burden off of me, and not try to push myself somewhere where I could, accomplish, but not happily so. And so I would have been a very bitter and resentful doctor, which is not a good doctor. So, granted, I may have made a hell of a lot more money, but I wouldn't have been happy. And I wouldn't have been as prepared for my soul's journey into the underworld when I got sick to be able to pull myself out again. I think that person is so many miles away from me. We can't even see the same horizon. And I like who I am today. I'm still a fixer-upper, but I like the path that I've taken through life so far. All right. If existence is good, then the clearest and cleanest and most correct relationship with it is also good. If existence is not good, by contrast, you're lost. Nothing will save you, certainly not petty rebellions, murky thinking, and obscurist blindness that constitutes deceit. Is existence good? You have to take a terrible risk to find out. Live in truth or live in deceit. Face the consequences and draw your conclusions. This is the act of faith whose necessity was insisted upon by the Danish philosopher Kierkegaard. You cannot know ahead of time. Even a good example is insufficient for proof, given the differences between individuals. The success of a good example can always be attributed to luck. Thus, you have to risk your particular individual life to find out. Is this the risk that the ancients described as the sacrifice of personal will to the will of God? It is not an act, it is not an act of submission, at least as submission is currently understood. It is an act of courage. It is faith that the wind will blow your ship to a new and better port. It is the faith that being can be corrected by becoming. It is the spirit of exploration itself. Perhaps it is better to conceptualize it this way. Everyone needs a concrete, specific goal, an ambition, and a purpose to limit chaos and make intelligible sense of his or her life. But all such concrete goals can and should be subordinate to what might be considered a meta goal, which is a way of approaching and formulating goals themselves. The meta goal could be live in truth. This means act diligently towards some well-articulated, defined, and temporary end. Make your criteria for failure and success timely and clear, at least for yourself, and even better if others can understand what you are doing and evaluate it with you. While doing so, however, allow the world and your spirit to unfold as they will while you act out and articulate the truth. This is both pragmatic ambition and the most courageous of faiths. Life is suffering. The Buddha stated that explicitly. Christians portray the same sentiment imagistically with the divine crucifix. The Jewish faith is saturated with its remembrance. The equivalence of life and limitation is the primary and unavoidable fact of existence. The vulnerability of our being renders us susceptible to the pains of social judgment and contempt and the inevitable breakdown of our bodies. But even all those ways of suffering, terribly as they are not sufficient to corrupt the world, to transform it into hell the way the Nazis and the Maoists and the Stalinists corrupted the world and turned it into hell. For that, Hitler stated so clearly, you needed to lie. In the big lie, there is always, and this is quoting Hitler, in the big lie, there is always a certain force of credibility, because the broad masses of a nation are always more easily corrupted in the deep strata of their emotional nature than consciously or voluntarily. And thus, in the primitive simplicity of their minds, they more readily fall victims to the big lie than the small lie, since they themselves often tell small lies in little matters, but would be ashamed to resort to large-scale falsehoods. It would never come into their heads to fabricate colossal untruths, and they would not believe that others could have the impudence to distort the truth so infamously, even though the facts which prove this to be so may be brought clearly in their minds. They will still doubt and waver, and will continue to think that there may be some other explanation. For the big lies, you need the little lies. The little lies is, metaphorically speaking, the bait used by the father of lies to hook his victims. The human capacity for imagination makes us capable of dreaming up and creating alternate worlds. This is the ultimate source of our creativity. With that singular capacity, however, comes the counterpart, the opposite side of the coin. We can deceive ourselves and others into believing and acting if things are other than we know they are. And why not lie? Why not twist and distort things to obtain small gain, or to smooth things over, or to keep the peace, or to avoid hurt feelings? Reality has its terrible aspect. Do we really need to confront its snake-headed face in every moment of our waking consciousness and every turn in our lives? Why not turn away, at least, when looking is simply too painful? The reason is simple. Things fall apart. What worked yesterday will not necessarily work for today. We have inherited the great machinery of state and culture from our forefathers, but they are dead and cannot deal with the changes of the day. The living can. We can open our eyes and modify what we have where necessary and keep the machinery running smoothly. Or we can pretend that everything is all right, fail to make the necessary repairs, and then curse fate when nothing goes our way. Things fall apart. This is one of the great discoveries of humanity, and we speed the natural deterioration of great things through blindness, inaction, and deceit. Without attention, culture degenerates and dies, and evil prevails. What you see of a lie when you act it out, and most lies are acted out rather than told, is very little of what it actually is. A lie is connected to everything else. It produces the same effect on the world that a single drop of sewage produces in even the largest crystal magnum of champagne. It is something best considered live and growing. When the lies get big enough, the whole world spoils. But if you look closely enough, the biggest of lies is composed of smaller lies, and those are composed of still smaller lies. And the smaller lie is where the big lie starts. It is not the mere misstatement of fact. It is instead act that has the aspect of the most serious conspiracy ever to possess the race of man. In its seeming innocuousness, its trivial meanness, the feeble arrogance that gives rise to it, the apparent trivial circumventing of responsibility that it aims at, these all work effectively to camouflage its true nature, its genuine dangerousness, and its equivalence with the great acts of evil that man perpetrates and often enjoys. Lies corrupt the world. Worse, that's their intent. First a little lie, and then several little lies to prop it up. After that, distorted thinking to avoid the shame of those lies produce, then a few more lies to cover up the consequences of the distorted thinking. Then, most terribly, the transformation of those now necessary lies through the practice into automated, specialized, structural, neurologically instantiated, unconscious belief and action. Then, the sickening of experience itself as action predicated on falsehood fails to produce the results intended. If you don't believe in brick walls, you will still be injured when you run headlong into one. Then you will curse reality itself for producing the wall. After that comes the arrogance and sense of superiority that invariably accompanies the production of successful lies, hypothetically successful lies. And that is one of the greatest dangers. Apparently, everyone is fooled. Everyone is so stupid except me. Everyone is stupid and fooled by me so that I can get away with whatever I want. Finally, there is the proposition. Being itself is susceptible to my manipulations. Thus, it deserves no respect. That's things falling apart, like a Cyrus severed into pieces. That's the structure of the person or the state disintegrating under the influence of a malign force. That's the chaos of the underworld emerging like a flood to subsume familiar ground. But it's not yet hell. Hell comes later. Hell comes when lies have destroyed the relationship between the individual or state and reality itself. Things fall apart. Life degenerates. Everything becomes frustration and disappointment. Hope consistently betrays. The deceitful individual desperately gestures at sacrifice like Cain, but fails to praise God. Then the drama enters into its final act. Tortured by constant failure, the individual becomes bitter. Disappointment and failure amalgamate and produce a fantasy. The world is bent on my personal suffering, my particular undoing, my destruction. I deserve, I must have my revenge. That's the gateway to hell. That's when the underworld, a terrifying and unfamiliar place, becomes misery itself. Oh my goodness. And we've gone over time. Have we gone over time? We have gone over time. Oh my gosh. So we only have one more page. I'm going to go ahead and finish it up if you don't mind. At the beginning of time, according to the great Western tradition, the Word of God transformed chaos into being through the act of speech. It is axiomatic within that tradition that man and woman alike are made into the image of God. We also transform chaos into being through speech. We transform the manifold possibilities of the future into the actualities of past and present. To tell the truth is to bring the most habitable reality into being. Truth builds edifices that can stand 1,000 years. Truth feeds and clothes the poor and makes nations wealthy and safe. Truth reduces the terrible complexity of a man to the simplicity of his words so that he can become a partner rather than an enemy. Truth makes the past truly past and makes the best use of the future's possibilities. Truth is the ultimate, inexhaustible, natural resource. It's the light in the darkness. See the truth. tell the truth. Truth will not come into the guise of opinions shared by others, as the truth is neither a collection of slogans nor an ideology. It will instead be personal. Your truth is something that only you can tell, based as it is on the unique circumstances of your life. Apprehend your personal truth. Communicate it carefully in an articulate manner to yourself and others. This will ensure your security and life more abundantly now, while you inhabit the structure of your current beliefs. This will ensure the benevolence of the future, diverging as it might be from the certainties of the past. The truth springs forth ever anew from the most profound well springs of being. It will keep your soul from withering and dying while you encounter the inevitable tragedy of life. It will help you avoid the terrible desire to seek vengeance for that tragedy, part of the terrible sin of being, which everything must bear gracefully just so it can exist. If your life is not what it could be, try telling the truth. If you cling desperately to an ideology or wallow in nihilism, try telling the truth. If you feel weak and rejected and desperate and confused, try telling the truth. In paradise, everyone speaks the truth. That is what makes it paradise. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. So, sorry about that. I lost track of time, but we got through chapter 8. Oh my gosh. We are now on rule 9. Assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. This next one's a great chapter, but the whole thing on lying and telling the truth. Shaman says in Buddhism there are 5 precepts like the commandments. The 4th precept is no lying, no hurtful speech. Yes. And it's amazing to me, I'm a little parched, that with all the differences between Occidental and European thought, between Eastern thinking and Western thinking, because there is a huge difference, and it's, as this says, it's built on small things, things that you wouldn't even think about, like the way that we perceive pictures. We usually perceive them in parts. We'll see the subject, we'll see this, we'll see that, and the Western mind goes from the part to the whole, whereas the Eastern mind, they take in the whole scene and then drill down the other way. There's a couple of YouTube things on the differences in language and how words are formed and things like that. But it's amazing with all those differences that we both come up with the same set of values. Different stories, Buddha and Christ, very different stories, but they both come to the same conclusions. Amanda says, hooray, thank you. And you are very welcome. And I thank you all for sticking in and going over time. So let's meet again on Saturday and get a little of the spirit into us. We're getting through Cain and Abel, and just talking about Cain and Abel and sacrifices in there, telling the truth. Am I my brother's keeper? That's a lie of omission there, buddy. You know exactly what happened to Abel. So we will get into that on Saturday, and I hope to see you all there. All right. Love you. My Pam fam. Oh, you guys are so good to me. All right. I'll talk to you later. Bye.